Hello everybody, and welcome to our second video in the KBO Commodities series. This video is about commodity futures and margin call. In our first video, we took you through the different commodity static data. In this video, we will be covering only futures and commodity futures. This is probably the most important video we will do in this series, and the one that most of you have been waiting for, as it will explain to you how the margin call process works for futures and commodity futures in Condor Plus Backoffice. And since there is a lot to cover, let's get started. So what is a margin call? Every day, a clearer computes the gains and losses per open deals for each of their clients. They then request that payments be made based on a margin percentage to cover all eventual losses. This is the margin call process. There are some prerequisite assumptions. We assume that all necessary static data have already been created in Condor Plus: the future, the commodity, the main account and the margin account, the call account, the margin type, and the collateral index. In addition, on the client or K plus TP user side, a master agreement should define the purpose and scope of the client's trading intentions with their clearer. The client's main account should be linked to securities account and SSIs published, and their call account should be linked to their main account. There are several steps to follow. We will give you a quick start overview so you know what to expect during the demo. In Condor Plus, the first step is to select a commodity future you wish to trade. I will choose the future on gold. You will then need to find the margin requirements for this future. The future information on my future is found on the site CME. When I look at this information, I will need to add it to Condor Plus. When you enter your futures trade in Condor Plus, you need to remember to use the designated trading folder. You will also need to enter a corresponding call account deal with the initial margin amount, the amount that you found on the CME site. This call account is where margin amounts are entered and managed in Condor Plus and Condor Plus Backoffice. You will also need to remember to link this call account to your designated trading folder. The link between your call account and your traded future is determined and managed by the trading folder. So when you add a future in Condor Plus, in order to manage the margin requirements for this deal, you will need to add a corresponding call account on the same folder. Now, in Condor Plus Backoffice, you might need to validate your future and call account trades in Condor Plus Backoffice. You will also need to set up your position process and make sure that it's been correctly configured. You will then need to run this process. Running the position process will give an idea of the long position in a future and is also necessary to calculate margin. Once your position and the selected future has been defined, you can then run the margin call process. So now let's start the demo. The first thing I need to do is to set the daily margin requirements for my future. To do this, I need to go to Data Manager, Collateral Agreement, Margin Requirement. The initial margin requirement for gold on the CME site was 3,666, with the maintenance margin requirement at 3,332. I need to enter this information in the margin requirement here. I then need to enter my future and the corresponding call account deal with the initial margin amount. In the call account, there are two important fields to configure. The first, you need to determine whether it is a principal increase or a principal decrease. The other is to choose margin type, whether it is a maintenance margin or an initial margin increase. I validate my deals in K plus TP, and then I need to run the position process. I go to the position process, I choose my traded future, I add my position date, and launch. To see my position in the future, I go to the tab, Position. As we previously said, we need to calculate the position in order to calculate the margin. Once I have an idea of my long position in the future, I can then run my margin call process. To do this, I go to Securities Management, Margin Call. I find my future, add my position date, import or reload quotes. This will allow me to change the quote if necessary. Once I have completely and correctly configured my margin call process, I launch. Under the Position Match tab, I can see position and margin call information concerning my future. But the tab that interests me the most is the margin call event. It is here that I find information on margin that I am looking for. To help you understand this information better, we will give you a quick overview to the different types of margin that exist. The first of these is initial margin. Initial margin is the amount required to have in an account when purchasing a future or an option. Or in other words, it is the amount required by the market or exchange for opening a futures position. Maintenance margin. Maintenance margin is the amount or the minimum amount you need to maintain in an account once your position is open. It represents a threshold whose purpose is to maintain the initial margin requirements of an open position. The maintenance margin includes the spread of the broker, and it is normally lower than the initial margin. Variation margin. Variation margin is the additional margin required to bring an account up to the required level. It is the amount of additional funds that a broker can request to maintain an initial margin requirement of a position in the case of loss or decrease of the value of the initial margin. Variation margin is required when the initial margin and the sum of the unrealized P&L fall below the maintenance margin. And the delta variation margin is the amount that you will need to add to a margin account in order to maintain the maintenance margin. The unrealized P&L, mark to market, is the profit or loss of a futures position. We hope these explications and information help you to understand better the margin call process for futures and commodity futures in Condor Plus Back Office. Please do not hesitate to contact us with your questions or queries.